Good day, Stewart's Chapel. Brother Don Pierson here, and Don Counts, and we're here on the Elk River at the Harris's place, and appreciate their hospitality and generosity for allowing us to be here today. This is Saturday devotion. I want to continue where we looked at yesterday. I'm not going to read all the same scriptures. I will give them to you if you want to look back in case you missed yesterday's. Joel chapter 1 verse 4, I will read. What the chewing locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the crawling locust has eaten. And what the crawling locust left, the consuming locust has eaten. And then I want to look at verse 12. The vine has dried up, and the fig tree has withered. The pomegranate tree, the palm tree also, and the apple tree. All the trees of the field are withered. Surely joy has withered away from the sons of men. And then chapter 2, verse 25. So the Lord said, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the crawling locust, the consuming locust, and the chewing locust, my great army which I sent among you. So from despair to hope. Yesterday I challenged you in the message about the idea of scoring of a tree and how it's a very slow death, and that the tree dies from above. It literally, even though there's no life on the inside, the absence of life is not known except for in its extremities. That which can be seen, its leaves and its twigs, that's where it's seen first. There's a wilting and a withering away that begins to be noticed, but it may take literally a year, a couple of years, for the tree to appear completely dead. And I challenged you yesterday that God is a God of hope who comes to them who recognizes that their joy is withered away, that there's death everywhere that they look, and yet God says, I can change, I am able to recreate, give life where there's been death. And those of us who are in Christ should know that message more than anyone else. We know what it is to be brought back from death to life. We know what it is to be born again. That which is impossible within the mind of man, we know the possibility of God. And yet we know that, though Christians know that, despair is not a foreign thing among Christians today. We struggle with the terrible D's. We just struggle with periods of spiritual drought in our own life because we neglect the living spring. We struggle with depression and despair. The same kind of D words that come to the world come to us. Death from someone we love and we grieve in the midst of it. Divorce. And that separation and that absence that feels just like someone had died, because someone has died, something has died in us, and the relationships are contaminated by death. We also constantly, well, probably not constantly, but more than we like to admit, experience the D of God's discipline. Now that's where Joel people are. This is the hand of God. Because of what they have done, their sin has brought this heavy hand of discipline. And those of us who have experienced God's hand of discipline, we know what that brings as well. There's the whole state of distress and drought, all the terrible D's. Our God is bigger than the terrible D's. I want you to know that. When God disciplines us, He always offers hope. Let me give you another image. On my farm, there are several trees that I have scored. They're locust trees. They're as big as some of these trees that are around me now. I scored them several years ago, and some very recently. Actually, some over this winter, I scored a few large locust trees. The ones I scored this winter still produced leaves this summer, this spring. But I've already noticed the wilting of them. The others, though, are in different stages. And I look around among God's people. At times I see death at different stages among individuals. Some are still green, and the death and is not so obvious to my eyes yet. Others I begin to see the wilting. Some I see them dropping their leaves prematurely. Others, death is in very advance. But you know what else is on my property? A few years ago, Stony Luna came in and logged my property. I have new growth where entire trees were cut off. Right at the stump, some almost with the ground. There is one particular, or two in particular, they're very close to each other. One is a sycamore stump and the other one is a walnut stump. Both have trees growing up larger in diameter than my thighs. They're growing well and healthy. There's all forms of life in them. They're experiencing a new life. I haven't messed with them. I'm not going to mess with them. They will grow. They're tall and straight trees with a lot of growth right now. They'll make it. They'll do well. God gave birth of a tree in the midst of death. That's not unusual, by the way. You can go through my pasture, and right now there are some persimmon trees that are growing, a grove of them actually, that I'm letting grow up now that are about anywhere from 4 to 12 inches in diameter. But they were bush hogged over many times over and over again. And from those bush hogged worn stumps, now that I'm not bush hogging that area, life have come from those stumps. We live in a world where we do experience the discipline of God's hand, but we also live in a world that desires for us not to have hope. The message I want to share with you from the stump and from Joel is that sometimes God allows us to have life in what I will call His second best. That tree that's growing out of the stump is not its best. That original tree that was there was the best. But as time goes on, that stump will rot and that tree will continue to grow, and most people won't even know about the stump. They'll only see that tree. I have experienced growth in my life, and I think all Christians are. You see, I think all mankind is offered a second gift from God. Now, Jesus is the ultimate gift. But man's been around a long time. And Jesus comes in and He says, you know what? I'll offer you new life. When you're in the terrible D's, and all those D words I mentioned, when you're in the terrible D's, you often lose sight of the incredible power of a God of life who can give life to us over and over again. Their joy was withered. There was death everywhere. And then in the midst of it, God brings life. He gives life. Love you, Stewart's Chapel.